Hello. This is Ryan again, and I'm going to read the book called Alice in the Wonderland. I'm going to read this book aloud for 30 minutes. Now it's being recorded, and now it's live. It feels so awkward, but I'm going to read this book anyway, because this is a thing that I have to do anyway. Okay? It feels really awkward to talk in front of the camera, but I'm going to get used to it. Okay? Okay. The device that I use is Kindle ebook. Just so you know, I'm not trying to do commercial thingy, and this if you are a YouTuber, or if you've ever experienced doing live in your own home, then you must be really familiar with this equipment. It's a Yeti mic. It's pretty popular among YouTubers, and that was the main reason why I bought this. Okay, anyway, I'm going to read this book from now on, okay? Okay. That you won, thought Alice, and after waiting till she fancied she heard the rabbit just under the window, she suddenly spread out her hand and made a snatch in the air. She did not get hold of anything, but she heard a little shriek and a fall, and a crash of broken glass, from which she concluded that it was just possible it had fallen into a cucumber frame, or something of the sort. Next came an angry voice, the rabbit's, "Pat, Pat, where are you?" And then a voice she had never heard before. "Sure, then I'm here, digging for apples, your honor." "Digging for apples, indeed," said the rabbit angrily. "Here, come and help me out of this." Sounds of more broken glass. "Now tell me, Pat, what's that in the window?" "Sure, it's an arm, your honor." He pronounced it arm. "An arm, you goose. Whoever saw one that size? Why, it fills the whole window." "Sure it does, yet, your honor, but it's an arm for all that." "Well, it's got no business there. At any rate, go and take it away." There was a long silence after this, and Alice could only hear whispers now and then, such as, "Sure, I don't like it." "Your honor, at all. Do as I tell you, you coward." And at last she spread out her hand again and made another snatch in the air. This time there were two little shrieks and more sounds of broken glass. "What a number of cucumber frames there must be," thought Alice. "I wonder what they'll do next. As for pulling me out of the window, I only wish they could. I'm sure I don't want to stay in here any longer." Now this story is a bit confusing at some point, but I'm going to keep reading it, okay? Alright. She waited for some time without hearing anything more. At last came a rumbling of little cartwheels and the sound of a good many voices all talking together. She made out the words, "Where's the other ladder? Why, I hadn't to bring but one. Bill's got the other bill. Fetch it here, lad." Here, pull them up at this corner. No, time together first. They don't reach half high enough yet. Oh, they'll do well enough. Don't be particular. Here, Bill, catch hold of this rope. Will the roof bear? Mind the loose slate. Oh, it's coming down, head below. Now who did that? It was Bill, I fancy. Who's to go down the chimney? Nay, I shan't. You do it. That I won't then. Bill's got to go down. Here, Bill. The master says you got to go down the chimney. Oh, so Bill's got to come down the chimney, has he? Said Alice to herself. Why they seem to put everything upon Bill. I wouldn't be in Bill's place for a good deal. This fireplace is narrow, to be sure, but I think I can kick a little. She drew her foot as far down the chimney as she could, and waited till she heard a little animal scratching and scrambling about in the chimney close above her. Then saying to herself, "This is Bill," she gave one sharp kick and waited to see what would happen next. The first thing she heard was a general chorus of "There goes Bill." Then the rabbit's voice alone, "Catch him, you by the hatch." Then silence, and then another confusion of voices. "Hold up his head. Brandy now, don't choke him. How was it, old fella? What happened to you? Tell us all about it." Last came a little feeble, squeaking voice. "That's Bill," thought Alice. "Well, I hardly know no more. Thank ya. I'm better now, but I'm still too flustered to tell you. All I know is something comes at me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I goes like a skyrocket." "So you did, old fella," said the others. "We must burn the house down," said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah at you." There was a dead silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, "I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off." After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, "A barrowful will do, to begin with." A barrowful of wood, thought Alice, but she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. "I'll put a stop to this," she said to herself and shouted out, "You'd better not do that again," which produced another dead silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. "If I eat one of these cakes," she thought, "it's sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose." So she swallowed It keeps saying that network has problem, but I'm going to leave it just as it is because it's now working back again. Okay, I'm going to keep reading this book. Okay, so she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard, Bill, was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and soon found herself safe in a thick wood. "The first thing I've got to do," said Alice to herself as she wandered about in the wood, "is to grow to my right size again. And the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan." It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea how to set about it, and while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous poppy was looking down at her with large round eyes, and feebly stretching out one paw, trying to touch her. "Poor little thing," said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it. But she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that it might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up, in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off all its feet at once with a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over, and the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. Then Alice, thinking it was very like having a game of play with a cart horse, and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran round the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a very little way forwards each time and a long way back, and barking hoarsely all the while, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting, with its tongue hanging out of its mouth, and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity for making her escape, so she set off at once, and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, and till the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. "And yet what a dear little puppy it was," said Alice as she leaned against a buttercup to rest herself and fan herself with one of the leaves. "I should have liked teaching it tricks like very much. If I'd only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I've got to grow up again. Let me see how is it to be managed. I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other. But the great question is that what? The great question certainly was what." Alice looked all round her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under the circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she had looked under it, and on both sides of it, and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on the top of it. She stretched herself up on tiptoe, and peeped over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on the top with its arms folded, quietly smoking a long hookah, and taking not the smallest notice of her or of anything else. Advice from a caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence. At last the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth and addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied, rather shyly, "I hardly know, sir. Just at present, at least, I know who I was when I got up this morning. but I think I must have been changed several times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar sternly. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself, to begin with, and being so many different sizes in a day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice, "but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, you will some day, you know, and then after that into a butterfly. I should think you will feel a little queer, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings may be different," said Alice. "All I know is it would feel very queer to me." "You," said the caterpillar contemptuously, "who are you?" Which brought them back again to the beginning of the conversation. Alice felt a little irritated at the caterpillar's making such very short remarks, and she drew herself up and said very gravely, "I think you ought to tell me who you are first." "Why?" said the caterpillar. Here was another puzzling question, and as Alice could not think of any good reason, and as the caterpillar seemed to be in a very unpleasant state of mind, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar called after her. "I've something important to say." This sounded promising. Certainly, Alice turned and came back again. "Keep your temper," said the caterpillar. "Is that all?" said Alice, swallowing down her anger as well as she could. "No," said the caterpillar. Alice thought she might as well wait, as she had nothing else to do, and perhaps after all it might tell her something worth hearing. For some minutes it puffed away without speaking, but at last it unfolded its arms, took the hookah out of its mouth again, and said, "So you think you are changed, do you?" "I'm afraid I'm sir," said Alice. "I can't remember things as I used, and I don't keep the same size for 10 minutes together." "Can't remember what things?" said the caterpillar. "Well, I've tried to say, how doth the little busy bee, but it all came different." Alice replied in a very melancholy voice. "Repeat your old, Father William," said the caterpillar. Alice folded her hands and began, "You are old, Father William." The young man said, "And your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think, at your age, is it right?" "In my youth," Father William replied to his son, "I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again." Okay, this is now confusing part. I'm gonna have to skip this part, okay? It's really confusing. I'm gonna get really lost if I read this over and over. "This is not right," said the caterpillar. "Not quite right, I'm afraid," said Alice timidly. "Some of the words have got altered." "It is wrong from beginning to end," said the caterpillar decidedly, and there was silence for some minutes. The caterpillar was the first to speak. "What size do you want to be?" it asked. "Well, I'm not particular as to size," Alice hastily replied. "Only one doesn't like changing so often, you know." "I don't know," said the caterpillar. Alice said nothing. She had never been so much contradicted in her life before, and she felt that she was losing her temper. "Are you content now?" said the caterpillar. "Well, I should like to be a little larger, sir, if you wouldn't mind," said Alice. 3 inches is such a rash height to be. It is a very good height indeed, said the caterpillar angrily, rearing itself upright as it spoke. It was exactly 3 inches high. But I'm not used to it, pleaded poor Alice in a peevish tone, and she thought to herself, I wish the creatures wouldn't be so easily offended. You will get used to it in time, said the caterpillar, and it put the hookah into its mouth and began smoking again. This time Alice waited patiently until it chose to speak again. In a minute or two the caterpillar took the hookah out of its mouth, it yawned once or twice, and shook itself. Then it got down off the mushroom and crawled away into the grass, merely remarking as it went, one side will make you grow taller, and the other side will make you grow shorter. One side of what? The other side of what? Thought Alice to herself. Of the mushroom, said the caterpillar, just as if she had asked it aloud, and in another moment it was out of sight. Alice remained looking thoughtfully at the mushroom for a minute, trying to make out which were the two sides of it, and as it was perfectly round, she found this is a very difficult question. However, at last she stretched her arms round it as far as they would go, and broke off a bit of the edge with each hand. And now which is which? She said to herself, and nibbled a little of the right hand bit to try the effect. The next moment she felt a violent blow underneath her chin. It had struck her foot. She was a good deal frightened by this very sudden change, but she felt that there was no time to be lost, as she was shrinking rapidly, so she set to work at once to eat some of the other bit. Her chin was pressed so closely against her foot that there was hardly room to open her mouth, but she did it at last, and managed to swallow a morsel of the left-hand bit. Come, my head's free at last, said Alice in a tone of delight, which changed into alarm in another moment, when she found that her shoulders were nowhere to be found. All she could see, when she looked down, was an immense length of neck, which seemed to rise like a stalk out of a sea of green leaves that lay far below her. What can all that green stuff be? Said Alice. And where have my shoulders got to? And oh, my poor hands! How is it I can't see you? She was moving them about as she spoke, but no result seemed to follow, except a little shaking among the distant green leaves, as there seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head. She tried to get her head down to them, and was delighted to find that her neck would bend about easily in any direction, like a serpent. She had just succeeded in curving it down into a graceful zigzag, and was going to dive in among the leaves, which she found to be nothing but the tops of the trees under which she had been wandering, when a sharp hiss made her draw back in a hurry. A large pigeon had flown into her face, and was beating her violently with its wings. Serpent, screamed the pigeon. I'm not a serpent, said Alice indignantly. Let me alone. Serpent, I say again, repeated the pigeon, but in a more subdued tone, and added with a kind of sob, I've tried every way, and nothing seems to suit them. I haven't the least idea what you are talking about, said Alice. I've tried the roots of trees, and I've tried banks, and I've tried hatches, the pigeon went on, without attending to her. But those serpents, there's no pleasing them. Alice was more and more puzzled, but she thought there was no use in saying anything more till the pigeon had finished, as if it wasn't trouble enough hatching the eggs, said the pigeon. But I must be on. The lookout for serpents, night and day. Why, I haven't had a wink of sleep these 3 weeks. I'm very sorry you've been annoyed, said Alice, who was beginning to see its meaning. And just as I'd taken the highest tree in the wood, continued the pigeon, raising its voice to a shriek, and just as I was thinking I should be free of 'em at last, they must needs come wriggling down from the sky. Ah, serpent. But I'm not a serpent, I tell you, said Alice. I'm a... Well, what are you? Said the pigeon. I can't see you are trying to invent something. I'm a little girl, said Alice, rather doubtfully, as she remembered the number of changes she had gone through that day. A likely story indeed, said the pigeon in a tone of the deepest contempt. I've seen a good many little girls in my time, but never one with such a knack as that. No, no, you are a serpent, and there's no use denying it. I suppose you'll be telling me next that you never tasted an egg. I have tasted eggs, certainly, said Alice, who was a very truthful child, but little girls eat eggs quite as much as serpents do, you know. Okay, it's been 26 minutes since I started reading this book, and my goal is to read this book for 30 minutes, so 4 minutes left. And currently, one person is watching me. I don't know who he is, but why are you watching this?